Welcome back to AM Agenda. Joining me this morning on our panel of politicians, the Parliamentary Secretary for Health, Mark Butler, and the Liberal Senator, Mitch Fifield. Good morning to you both.
Morning, Ashley.
Morning. Thank you for joining us. Now, we've already spoken about the health reforms with Mark, so let's get your reaction to this, Mitch. We've seen over the weekend the premiers have been meeting with the Prime Minister, but it seems to be at a bit of a stalemate. The PM saying there's a lot of work yet to be done. Is this doomed for failure, or do you think that the PM will be able to end up convincing the premiers to get on board?
I think it's doomed for failure, and I think that's the most obvious thing about the process that the Prime Minister is going through. This process is designed to show that he's trying to do something. It's not actually designed to reach an outcome. It's yet another example where it's more important for this government to be seen to be trying to do something than actually achieving something. I mean, you wouldn't treat Kristina Keneally the way Kevin Rudd treated her last week if you wanted to work cooperatively with the states and to get an outcome. I think his behaviour in relation to her was pretty ordinary. Victoria is taking quite a reasoned and rational approach to health. The Victorian health system is far and away the best health system in the nation. It's still got a way to go, but it's far better than New South Wales, far better than Queensland. So I can entirely understand why Premier Brumby is reluctant to embrace this health proposal. But what strikes me as absolutely stunning is the fact that the Henry Review, which goes to the heart of Commonwealth-state relations, hasn't been released. Yet the Prime Minister is expecting the states to sign up to a health agreement in the absence of the knowledge of what Henry proposes.
Well, the Treasurer yesterday did make it clear that the Henry Tax Review will be out by the budget. So, as you point out, that might not be out by COAG, so the state premiers might not get to see it. But the Treasurer says that these two should be viewed as different things and that the premiers don't need to worry about missing out because of that tax review. But as to what the Coalition is doing on this, we don't have a full plan from Tony Abbott. What makes you think that the Coalition would have better luck in reforming the country's hospitals than a Labor Prime Minister with so many Labor premiers?
Well, we've outlined what we would put in place for New South Wales and Queensland.
Exactly. There's no idea for the rest of the country.
Which is local boards, because New South Wales and Queensland is where there's the greatest need for improvement.
So is there no need for improvement in the other states?
No, we've put forward a proposal for local boards for New South Wales and Queensland, and we'll be outlining other elements of our health policy over time. But this is the government that promised that it would have fixed public health by the middle of last year. They didn't. They said that if it wasn't fixed by the middle of last year that they would take over the public hospitals. They haven't. So they've broken a promise. They're behind schedule, they're behind their own schedule, and they're now putting forward a process which is destined to failure, simply to provide them a cover that, well, we tried and failed.
Okay, well, as I said, we have gone through this with Mark Butler, but I will let you respond to a couple of those points, especially the meeting that Mitch Fifield raised between Premier Keneally and the Prime Minister last Friday. We saw that very awkward television scene, a pick-fack as we call it, of the Prime Minister seeming to ignore Premier Keneally as she was talking to him. Was that awkward and embarrassing, do you think, for the government?
Well, look, I think there's been a very heavy analysis of the body language in that, which probably didn't really get to the nub of the discussion that the Prime Minister was there to have with Premier Keneally, and that was the crux of the reason for them being there. It was a constructive meeting. This is the biggest state in the Federation. It was proper that the Prime Minister visit Premier Keneally first to have a discussion with her about her views on the reform plan. I think her response has been very constructive. She's got some questions that she wants answered before the COAG meeting, which is a reasonable position for her and her government to take. But I think there's been a bit too much analysis of the body language in that.
Mark would never behave like that. We know that for sure.
We know that. Look, let's move on to some other issues that are around. Of course, there's been a lot of debate about Tony Abbott's plan for a paid parental leave scheme, but now the Coalition's turning the spotlight back on Labor, saying, well, why haven't we seen any legislation for Labor's scheme, which is due to kick in January next year, but the legislation hasn't been before the Parliament. Why not?
Well, the legislation will be presented in due course. We've committed to the scheme starting on the 1st of January, and there will be a legislative timeframe that makes sure that we're able to meet that commitment. What we do know, though, is that particularly parents who are conceiving at the moment have a guarantee from the Labor Party that come the 1st of January there will be a paid parental leave scheme in place when they finally have their baby arrive. Now, it's way, way overdue. For 12 years, the previous government did nothing. Indeed, Tony Abbott said it would be done over his dead body, and for that time we were only the second after the United States, only the second OECD nation not to have a paid parental leave scheme in place. We made a commitment before the election we'd do that. Probably it could have been done a little bit earlier if the global financial crisis hadn't intervened, but it will be in place by the 1st of January. That is a rock-solid commitment that the Prime Minister and Julia Gillard and Jenny Macklin have given to parents or expecting parents of Australia, and we'll meet that.
Well, Mitch, the government has been making a lot of your plan, and what it says has been confusion over what companies will need to deal with this new 1.7% levy to pay for your scheme. And there's been debate about whether or not the policy is that it's income after tax or profit, or that 5 million mark as to when it actually kicks in. Julie Bishop was speaking on one of the Sunday programs yesterday. Here's what she had to say.
This will affect less than 1%. And as I say, we're hoping
but it's the 1% that employs more than half of all Australians.
But it's also the companies that will have made a profit of $5 million or more. Taxable income is $5 million. It's a substantial business, and that's $5 million in profit.
So, Mitch, does this apply to companies that have a taxable income of $5 million, or is it a profit of $5 million? Isn't there quite a bit of a difference between those two things?
Yeah, there is a difference between those two things. My understanding is that companies with a taxable income of profit of more than $5 million. Just going back to what Mark was talking about before, that we should trust Labor that they'll get this scheme in on time. We've heard a lot about Labor in relation to promises. They promised they'd fix public health by the middle of last year. They didn't. We've got no reason to have any greater confidence in this government that they can introduce a paid maternity leave scheme. If it's intended to come in by January next year, you'd want to have legislation in the Parliament right now. Not only has legislation not been introduced into the House of Representatives, we haven't even seen a draft of the legislation. There's no reason to have confidence that the government will get this scheme in, and their scheme is an inferior one. Ours covers carers for 6 months. Ours replaces the wage that's foregone by being out of the workforce. Ours is a better scheme. Ours is a more comprehensive scheme, and I think ours is a scheme which will get the head nod of the Australian public.
But it does seem like your scheme has been, the message of your scheme has been getting a little bit confused on the way, with senior figures in the party not seeming to know the difference between what companies are going to be affected.
Well, I think with these policies, it's best if we leave it to the Prime spokesman, in this case Sharman Stone, to be the spokesman. Sharman is across the details. Sharman is consulting with industry and with business about the application of the new scheme. And I think that's as it should be.
Okay, Mark Butler, Mitch Fifield, we have run out of time for today's program. Thank you so much for both joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, David Spears will be along with PM Agenda this afternoon. I'll see you again tomorrow morning. For now, I'm Ashley Gillen. Thanks for your company.